Before everything, there was nothing to measure and nowhere to put it. No stars or planets, no up or down, not even darkness, because there was no space for night to rest in. And then, roughly 13.8 billion years ago, the story began. It did not begin with an explosion inside a room. It began with the room itself appearing and swelling and stretching beyond sight. We call that moment the Big Bang. Space itself expanded. Time itself started to flow. In the first instance, the newborn cosmos was hotter and denser than the core of any star. Energy boiled into particles, quarks and electrons, neutrinos and photons, flickering in a bright, restless sea. As the universe raced outward, it also cooled, the way steam softens into mist. Quarks linked into protons and neutrons. Light scattered through the fog. For a few minutes, the first light elements were forged. Hydrogen, helium, and a breath of lithium, written into the future like a quiet promise. The forces of nature settled into their roles. The stage was set, but the lights were still dim. For hundreds of millions of years, the universe passed through a hush we now call the cosmic dark ages. There were no stars yet, only great clouds of hydrogen drifting in near-perfect night. But gravity is patient. It gathered the clouds, grain by grain, drawing them into knots. Deep in those knots, pressure rose, temperature climbed, and then, at last, fire bloomed. The first stars ignited. They were giants, short-lived, intense, and brilliant. In their hearts, hydrogen fused into helium and then into heavier elements. Some died young, scattering the products of their lives across space in supernovae, so luminous they outshone whole galaxies. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, iron. The alphabet of future worlds drifted outward, atom by atom, to seed the dark. Galaxies gathered along invisible threads of matter, a cosmic web stretching across the deep. They spun into spirals and swelled into bright cores. They collided and merged and grew. Somewhere on one of those threads, a modest spiral took shape. We would later name it the Milky Way. Billions of suns circled its center like fireflies on a slow carousel. Dust lanes curled through its arms. Star-forming nurseries glowed. All of this unfolded in silence. But there is light, ancient and soft. The afterglow of the Big Bang, what we call the cosmic microwave background, still hums through space, a faint memory from when the universe was about 380,000 years old, when atoms first held electrons and the fog turned transparent. If you could tune your senses to that whisper, you would hear the oldest light telling you that everything once was one. As generations of stars were born and died, the elements they forged enriched the gas around them. The second stars formed with more to work with, and then the third and the fourth. Dust gathered, clouds collapsed, gravity kept its rhythm. Galaxies danced in slow motion, tugging at each other for eons. From that dance came structure, clusters, filaments, and voids. The Big Bang was not a single boom and then silence. It is an ongoing unfolding, a long breath that is not yet finished. Even now, the fabric of space continues to expand, carrying distant galaxies away from us, stretching the wavelengths of their light until they redden and fade. We live inside that expansion, like fish inside a moving sea. If you press your hand to your chest and feel a heartbeat, you are listening to a history that began in that first radiant moment. The calcium in your bones was cooked in stars. The iron in your blood remembers a supernova. Every atom in you is older than the earth, older than the sun, older than the quiet night that cradles you now. In this way, the Big Bang is not far away. It is intimate, the reason there is something here to notice anything at all. So rest in that thought. There was once no time, then time began. There was once no place, then a place grew vast enough to hold galaxies, oceans, and small lives, learning to tell stories about their beginning. From nothing came order, and from order came stars, and from stars came the materials of memory. The universe learned to shine, and then much later, to think. This is where our tale opens, with warmth turning into light, light gathering into stars, stars gathering into galaxies, and galaxies gathering into a map so large it humbles every question. From that map, in one ordinary spiral arm under the light of future suns, other chapters will follow. But for now, breathe with the cosmos as it expands. Let the early universe pass before you like a slow tide, pulling you gently towards sleep. Tomorrow, we will drift closer to the making of our sun, the birth of Earth, and the first stirrings of life. Tonight, float in the first light, and know that you are made of it. When the first stars were born, the universe changed. The long hush of the dark ages ended, and light returned to wide space. Those first suns were enormous, hot, blue, brief. They lived fast and died young. Some burned for a few million years, a heartbeat in cosmic time, before collapsing under their weight. In death, they exploded as supernovae, casting enriched matter back into the night and seeding the future with heavier elements. Gravity kept gathering what expansion had spread thin. Gas fell into great clouds. Clouds tightened into dense cores. The cores flattened into slowly turning disks. In those disks, new generations of stars kindled. The simple hydrogen of the early cosmos became varied chemistry in later eras. Star nurseries, glowing nebulae wrapped in veils of dust, flared like lanterns along the arms of young galaxies. So the first great structures took their places on the stage. Galaxies, islands of light in a sea without shores. Some were irregular smudges. Some swelled into smooth ovals of old red stars. Others unfolded into grand spirals, long arms curling like a dancer's ribbons around bright cores. They turned slowly, one rotation taking hundreds of millions of years. Between their stars drifted dark lanes of dust and cold gas, raw material for what came next. The universe did not arrange itself at random. It followed a hidden scaffolding, threads of invisible matter that we call dark, not because it is evil, but because it does not shine. Along those threads, like dew on a web, galaxies collected into filaments and nodes. Clusters formed, superclusters bridged the distance. Vast voids opened between them. The pattern was delicate and enormous at once. A lace of light stretched across billions of light years. Among these countless cities of stars, one modest spiral grew by gathering smaller neighbors. It tugged them in, mixed their stars, and braided their dust into its arms. We would one day call it the Milky Way. From above, it would look like a barred spiral, a glowing bar across the center, arms swept back in a gentle whirl. Dark rivers of dust writing calligraphy through the starlight. In a quiet suburb of one arm, far from the crowded core, a small yellow star would eventually take its place. At the hearts of many galaxies, something stranger took root. Black holes of staggering mass. They fed on gas and the occasional star, heating the space around them and launching thin jets that blazed for thousands of light years. Their gravity helped decide how quickly galaxies grew, when stars formed, and where gas could settle. Creation and destruction were not enemies here. They were partners, trading roles as the eons passed. If you step outside on a clear night and look up, every naked eye point of light you see belongs to our own galaxy. Yet beyond those familiar stars, far past the reach of your sight, lie the others. Some are so distant that the light leaving them began its journey before the Earth existed. By the time it reaches us, the expansion of space has stretched that light, reddening it like an ember cooling in the air. With the most powerful telescopes, we are not only seeing far away, we are seeing long ago. The rhythm of this age was simple and grand. Clouds collapsed, stars ignited, elements were forged, stars aged and died, returning what they had made to the dark. New stars rose from enriched dust, brighter and with more stories hidden in their light. With each generation, the table of elements grew more complete. The cosmos learned to make not only fire and stone, but the seeds of water, air, and chemistry subtle enough to copy itself. In time, galaxies met and merged. Some encounters were gentle, like tides sliding together. Some were violent, all gas set roaring and bright. Collisions did not smash stars like pebbles. Space is too wide for that. Instead, gravity stirred the gas, and waves of fresh star birth swept across the collided disks. Out of this rough courtship, larger, calmer forms emerged. The universe likes to build by combining, then settling. And through it all, the afterglow of the beginning, the cosmic microwave background, kept humming in the far radio sky. First light stretched thin and cool. It reminds us that everything we see arose from one moment, and that the expansion which began then still continues now. Galaxies drift apart like boats on a widening sea. The distances grow. The silence deepens. Yet the lamps remain lit. This was the cosmic dawn, the age when darkness learned to shine, when matter found its pattern, when the map of the night took on its enduring shapes. In that map is room for everything that follows. Stars like our sun, planets with weather and seasons, stones and seas and the patience of time. The next chapter draws us inward, toward a small corner of a spiral arm, where a cloud will fall together, a star will flare awake, and a system of worlds will begin to circle in the light. The great structures of the cosmos were in place. Now the story narrows, drawing us inward to a small cloud swirling within a spiral arm of the Milky Way. About 4.6 billion years ago, that cloud, rich in gas and dust recycled from earlier stars, began to collapse. Perhaps a nearby supernova nudged it. Perhaps gravity simply reached a quiet tipping point. The cloud flattened into a disk, a silver coin of matter turning slowly around a brightening center. In that center, pressure rose until the first fire lit, our newborn sun. Within the sunlit disk, dust learned to cling. Grains stuck to grains, pebbles to pebbles. Snowballs of rock and ice became boulders, and boulders merged into mountain-sized bodies called planetesimals. Collisions were frequent and loud in that silent vacuum. The inner disk was hot, so only metal and rock could survive. Farther out, ices were safe, and giant planets gathered gas. In the warm inner lanes, a handful of growing worlds jostled for space. One of them would become Earth. Each impact heated the young planet. With every strike, energy poured inward. Radioactive elements in the rock added a steady glow from within. The proto-Earth swelled, molten in places, an ocean of magma under a sky of vapor. As metals melted, iron pooled and sank toward the center, forming a dense core. Lighter silicate rock rose to become the mantle. Already, the planet was learning its layers. Core, mantle, crust, an onion of stone wrapped around a heart of iron. Then came a blow that changed everything. A Mars-sized world, sharing Earth's orbit, drifted too close. The collision was catastrophic. Rock vaporized, oceans of magma splashed into space. A ring of debris circled the wounded planet. From that ring, our moon gathered itself, cooling to a bright, close companion. In those early nights, the moon loomed huge, riding low over a horizon of fire. Its gravity tugged fiercely at the young oceans to come, slowing Earth's spin, steadying its tilt, and becoming a quiet guardian of climate and seasons. After the giant impact, Earth did not rest. The sky was thick with steam, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and sulfur gases. Lightning stitched the clouds. Volcanoes bled heat from the deep, building mountains only to melt them again. Asteroids and comets still wandered through the inner system, their visits punctuating the eons. Some carried water locked in minerals and ice. Some carried simple carbon compounds, seeds of future chemistry. Bombardment softened with time, the way a storm loses its edge. As heat bled to space, the first miracle of calm began. Vapor condensed on cooling rock. Rain fell, not for hours or days, but for centuries. Warm, mineral-rich water hissing as it struck hot ground. Rivers carving paths through newly solid crust. Basins filled. The air cleared just enough for a dim sun to gleam on the first seas. Tiny crystals of zircon, surviving from those ancient days, whisper that continents' beginnings and liquid water arrived earlier than we once thought. In their lattice is a memory of coolness amid fire. The crust did not lie still. It cracked and drifted in slow rafts, early plates sliding over the soft mantle below. Where plates met, one sank and melted. Volcanoes rose in chains. New crust formed along spreading ridges on the seabed. This patient motion, plate tectonics, became Earth's long heartbeat. It recycled rock, rebuilt mountains, and helped regulate climate by burying and releasing gases over deep time. Continents gathered like rafts, split like ice, and wandered toward new horizons. Deep within, the iron core kept spinning. Liquid iron in the outer core churned and swirled, generating a magnetic field that wrapped the planet in an unseen cloak. That field bent the charged wind from the sun and shielded the atmosphere from being stripped away. Where the field funneled particles into the sky, curtains of light, auroras, would have shimmered above unfamiliar coasts, painting ancient nights with green and red. With oceans came weather, and with weather came the long conversation between stone and water. Rain pulled carbon dioxide from the air, rivers carried it to the sea, and the oceans tucked it into carbonate rocks. Volcanoes returned some to the sky. Over time, this cycle softened extremes. The young sun was dimmer than today, yet the air held enough greenhouse warmth to keep the seas from freezing. The planet practiced balance, imperfect at first, but improving with age. On the newborn seafloor, at jagged ridges and in black smoker chimneys, hot water met cold ocean. Minerals blossomed into chimneys and filigree, chemical gradients stacked like batteries in the dark. Elsewhere, along tide lines under a looming moon, pools filled and dried, concentrating simple molecules. Waves beat a patient rhythm on basalt shores. Tides reached far inland, stirring quiet lagoons. In warm shallows and at midnight vents alike, energy and matter found endless ways to meet. The atmosphere was different then. There was no free oxygen to breathe. The air was heavy with steam and carbon dioxide, edged with the breath of volcanoes. The seas were not blue by law, but by chance, colored by minerals and by the faint light that pierced the clouds. Days were shorter, tides stronger, storms common, and yet the brutality of the early world carried a gentleness too. Heat enough to drive chemistry, shelter enough for fragile structures to persist, cycles regular enough to try again after every failure. Little by little, the planet calmed. The crust thickened over cooler mantle. The greatest floods of lava waned. Islands congealed into the seeds of continents. Rivers learned their valleys. The oceans deepened into basins rimmed by new shores. Overhead, the moon drifted farther out, tugging less fiercely, settling the tides into a slower breath. The sky still shifted, but between the tempests were long blue hours and long black nights to match. If you could stand on a safe cliff near one of those early coasts and listen, you would hear a world learning to breathe. Wind tracing the edges of rock, surf drawing lines and erasing them, rain counting out a tempo on warm stone. Beneath you, the planet's interior turned like a low drum. Before you, the sea exhaled steam and received rivers. Above you, the sun rose pale through a veil and set in copper. This is how Earth arrived, through fire, impact, rain, and time. A molten globe became a layered one, a poisonous sky thinned over widening seas. The planet found its balance between freezing and boiling, between stillness and change. It learned to hold an ocean and to keep an atmosphere, to shield itself and to renew itself. In the hush that followed, the stage was ready. What came next did not shout. It assembled in whispers, structures building from smaller structures, order rising from rich disorder, patterns discovering how to copy themselves. In warm pools and at vent mouths, in films on rock and in droplets on sand, the first steps toward life gathered courage. But that is another chapter. For now, rest with the sound of ancient rain, the slow pull of the moon, and the steady heat from the heart of the world. Tomorrow we descend into the water to look for the earliest stirrings, where chemistry learns to remember. The oceans were vast, restless, and still new. They rolled across the face of the planet, heavy with dissolved minerals, warmed by volcanic ridges, stirred by tides under a close moon. In this world without forests or animals, without even plants to soften the shore, the sea itself was the cradle of every future story. Life did not arrive with a flash, but with quiet chemistry repeated again and again. Simple molecules floated through the waves, some delivered by comets, others born in lightning strikes or volcanic plumes. They linked, broke, and linked again. In tide pools, in droplets, in thin films on rocks, patterns grew slightly more complex with each cycle. Somewhere in this patient mixing, a molecule learned to copy itself. That ability, to remember shape and to pass that memory onward, was the first fragile victory of life. For millions of years, these tiny systems refined themselves. Bubbles of fatty molecules gathered around them, forming membranes, offering shelter. Inside, reactions became more efficient, more stable. These protocells were not alive as we define it today, yet they carried the seed of continuity. In time, some learned to use the energy around them, drawing power from sunlight, from minerals in vents, from heat seeping out of the deep crust. What was once random chemistry had crossed a threshold. It had become biology. The earliest true cells were simple. They drifted in the sea more than 3.5 billion years ago, leaving behind faint traces in ancient rocks. Some found a home near hydrothermal vents on the seafloor, where hot, mineral-rich water met the cold ocean. Others floated near the surface, basking in sunlight. Though invisible to the naked eye, these cells transformed the planet. They multiplied, competed, and adapted. Through their slow successes, the blueprint for all later life was drafted. One of the greatest revolutions came when certain microbes mastered photosynthesis. Using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, they produced food for themselves and, as a byproduct, released oxygen. At first, this oxygen reacted with iron dissolved in the seas, staining the ocean floor with rust-red layers that we still find in banded iron formations. But eventually, the iron was used up, and oxygen began to accumulate in the air. This was the Great Oxidation Event, more than 2 billion years ago. To the microbes of that time, it was both poison and opportunity. Some perished, while others adapted, learning to use oxygen for energy. The air thickened with this new breath. The sky itself changed hue, becoming brighter, clearer. Ozone formed in the upper layers, shielding the surface from harsh ultraviolet light. Life could explore new spaces, expanding from vents and shadows into shallower waters kissed by the sun. Cells grew more complex. Some began living together in colonies, each taking on different roles, cooperating instead of competing. The principle of teamwork had entered biology, and it would never be forgotten. Then, in one of evolution's boldest experiments, some cells absorbed others instead of digesting them. These swallowed guests survived inside their hosts, providing energy in exchange for shelter. From these unlikely partnerships, new kinds of cells emerged. Cells with nuclei, with mitochondria, with compartments specialized for different tasks. These were the ancestors of all animals, plants, and fungi. Complexity had taken root. For more than 3 billion years, Earth was ruled by microbes. To us, they seem small, but they achieved the greatest transformations in planetary history. They built the air we breathe, shaped the oceans we sail, and laid the chemical foundations of every future ecosystem. Without their patience, there would be no forests, no cities, no humans to tell the tale. Around 600 million years ago, something stirred in the oceans once more. Conditions had shifted. Oxygen levels were higher, climates more stable. Multicellular life blossomed in an event known as the Cambrian explosion. In less than 50 million years, a brief moment in deep time, the seas filled with creatures of astonishing variety. Trilobites with armored shells crawled across the seafloor. Worms tunneled in the mud. Soft-bodied forms waved fronds like underwater gardens. Predators with grasping limbs and complex eyes hunted through the shallows. The world had awakened into richness. Where once only single cells drifted, now entire food webs stretched across reefs and basins. Nervous systems sparked, muscles flexed, skeletons hardened. Life had invented mobility, perception, and defense. From this surge would come every lineage we know. Fish, insects, reptiles, birds, mammals, and humans. If you could dive into those Cambrian seas, the water would seem both alien and familiar. You would see shapes with no modern equivalent, yet carrying echoes of future creatures. You would see eyes staring back, eyes that were brand new, learning to track light and shadow. You would see the first communities of prey and predator, a choreography that continues in every forest and plain today. The rise of animals changed the planet as much as the rise of oxygen had. For the first time, landscapes echoed with motion. Seafloors were grazed, burrowed, and turned over. Nutrients cycled in new ways. Evolution accelerated, feeding on its own success. The stage was no longer empty. It was crowded, vivid, and alive with possibility. From pools of chemistry to thriving seas of creatures, life had crossed another threshold. The Earth was no longer just a planet of stone and water. It had become a living world. The next acts would be played out on this stage, continents moving, climates shifting, and life venturing onto land. But for now, imagine the ocean, 500 million years ago, shimmering under sunlight, alive with forms strange and beautiful, and know that within them lay the ancestors of us all. The oceans teemed with trilobites and ancient fish. The continents greened with ferns and towering forests, and the sky filled with insects larger than a human hand. The world was alive in ways no creature had ever seen before. But it was on land, in the swamps and plains of the Mesozoic era, that life prepared its boldest chapter yet, the reign of the dinosaurs. It began over 230 million years ago, in the aftermath of a mass extinction that had swept away most living things. The earth was quiet and scarred, but out of that silence new creatures emerged. Among them were small, agile reptiles, walking upright on their hind legs, balanced by long tails. They were not yet the giants we imagine, but they carried within them the blueprint for what was to come. Over time, these reptiles diversified. Some grew larger, their teeth sharp, their claws curved for hunting. Others became gentle giants, long-necked herbivores grazing the treetops. Evolution worked patiently, experimenting with form and function. The world grew warmer, the air rich with carbon dioxide, and lush vegetation spread across vast floodplains. It was a paradise for creatures that could grow huge, and the dinosaurs answered the invitation. Sauropods stretched their necks higher than houses, their footsteps shaking the ground. Herds of them moved slowly across ancient plains, stripping leaves from trees as they went. Their size was both a shield and a strategy. Few predators dared attack creatures so immense. Carnivorous theropods, lean and muscular, prowled the same landscapes, their senses sharp, their speed deadly. The balance between hunter and prey shaped the drama of the age. Dinosaurs were not alone. The seas were ruled by reptilian swimmers. Ichthyosaurs shaped like dolphins, plesiosaurs with long necks gliding through the water, and later mosasaurs, vast predators with jaws wide enough to swallow a human whole. Above, the skies belonged to pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to master flight. With wingspans from a sparrow's width to that of a small plane, they rode the warm currents, scouting the land below. The Mesozoic world was dynamic. Continents drifted apart, breaking the supercontinent Pangaea into pieces that began to resemble the map we know today. New seas opened between them, changing currents, shifting climates. Volcanoes breathed fire, raising mountains and spilling basalt across the land. Yet life thrived. In tropical regions, cycads and conifers formed thick forests. Along rivers and lakes, turtles, crocodiles, and early mammals found their niches in the shadow of giants. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs adapted to every challenge. Some grew armor, stegosaurs with plates rising from their backs, ankylosaurs with tails like clubs. Others developed horns and frills, ceratopsians defending their herds with elaborate displays and weapons. Feathers appeared in small theropods, first for warmth and display, then shaping into wings. The line between dinosaur and bird blurred until one branch took flight and never looked back. Every sparrow in your garden today is a living descendant of those feathered pioneers. The age of dinosaurs was not static. Extinctions came and went. Climates shifted. Oceans rose and retreated. Yet the dinosaurs endured, evolving into new forms again and again. Their resilience was remarkable. For far longer than humans have walked the earth, these creatures ruled it, shaping ecosystems on every continent. But even giants cannot escape the rhythm of time. About 66 million years ago, fate intervened. A massive asteroid, more than 10 kilometers wide, struck the Yucatan Peninsula with the force of billions of bombs. The impact vaporized rock, sent firestorms racing across continents, and threw dust high into the atmosphere. Darkness fell. Photosynthesis faltered. Plants withered. Food chains collapsed. Within a few years, the great dinosaurs were gone. Only the small and adaptable survived. The mammals hiding in burrows, the birds that could fly and feed in new ways, the creatures able to endure scarcity. The Mesozoic era ended in devastation, closing the long reign of the giants. And yet, in their extinction, they left gifts. Their world had been transformed by their presence. Forests had been shaped by their grazing, ecosystems balanced by their hunting. Their bones enriched the soil, their legacy written in stone. And in one remarkable lineage, the birds, the spirit of the dinosaurs still soars above us. The age of dinosaurs was a time of wonder and scale, of creatures so immense they defy imagination, of skies and seas filled with forms both strange and beautiful. It was a time when life reached outward into every possibility, proving its resilience, its creativity, its endless capacity to adapt. From the silence after the asteroid came a new dawn. The age of mammals was about to begin. Small, warm-blooded creatures that had waited in the shadows would step forward into the vacant world. From them, in time, would come primates, and from primates, us. But before that story begins, pause to imagine a world where giants walked, where the earth trembled under their steps, and where life itself proved that for a while, size was the greatest strategy of all. The age of the dinosaurs ended not with a whisper, but with fire and shadow. An asteroid's impact tore the sky, shrouding the world in dust and darkness. Forests burned, oceans acidified, and the long chain of life strained under the weight of catastrophe. For countless generations, dinosaurs had ruled every landscape. Now, in the span of a geological moment, they were gone. Yet the end of one world is the beginning of another. Amid the ashes, in burrows and thickets, in hidden corners where giants had not noticed them, small creatures endured. They were warm-blooded, covered in fur, with sharp senses and quick reflexes. They were mammals, descendants of tiny shrew-like beings that had scurried beneath the feet of dinosaurs for over 100 million years. While giants fell, the small survived. At first, mammals were modest. Some dug burrows, feeding on roots and insects. Others climbed into branches, grasping fruit and seeds. They lived in the shadows, avoiding predators, making use of whatever scraps the empty world offered. But with the dinosaurs gone, entire ecosystems stood vacant. Forests waited for grazers, rivers for drinkers, plains for wanderers. Into this open stage, Mammals began to grow. Over millions of years, their forms diversified. Some became larger, grazing on the new grasses that spread across the continents. Others became swift hunters, evolving teeth for tearing and claws for grasping. Whales took to the seas, their ancestors once small land dwellers returning to the water, transforming into giants that sang across the oceans. Bats found the night sky, mastering flight with wings of skin stretched across slender bones. Mammals were no longer confined to one role. They became everything. Grazers, hunters, climbers, flyers, swimmers. The earth itself was changing too. Continents drifted further apart. New mountain ranges rose where plates collided, casting shadows that shaped climate. Grasses evolved, turning entire landscapes into savannas and prairies. These grassy expanses favored herd animals, horses, antelope, bison, and the predators that followed them. Evolution rewarded endurance, speed, and cooperation. Herds thundered across plains, while packs hunted with coordination unknown to the solitary reptiles of the past. Some mammals grew enormous, rivaling the dinosaurs in size. Mastodons and mammoths, armored glyptodonts, rhinoceros-like brontotheres, and giant ground sloths wandered the Ice Age world. Others refined intelligence instead of bulk. Primates, living in tropical forests, developed grasping hands, keen vision, and social bonds. Within them lay the seeds of self-awareness, of curiosity, of storytelling. The age of mammals was not without its trials. Climate swung between warmth and ice. Glaciers advanced and retreated, carving valleys, reshaping rivers, and testing the resilience of every species. Extinctions struck again and again, pruning some lineages while sparing others. But through it all, mammals adapted, finding new ways to endure, to feed, to thrive. Their warm blood allowed them to remain active in cold nights and frozen winters. Their fur shielded them from chill. Their varied teeth let them eat nearly anything. Their live births and parental care gave young a better chance to survive. These advantages, subtle compared to the drama of dinosaur claws and teeth, proved decisive in the long run. From small beginnings, mammals rose to occupy every corner of the earth. They learned to inhabit the highest mountains and the deepest seas, the cold tundras and the hottest deserts. They became both fragile and powerful, vulnerable as individuals, yet unstoppable as a group. And in the branches of primate trees, one lineage in particular began to look at the world differently. Eyes grew sharper, hands more dexterous, minds more curious. These were our ancestors, not yet human, but already walking a path that would lead to language, to culture, to history. The age that began in shadow after the fall of the dinosaurs had become something new. It was not ruled by giants, but by adaptability. Not by scale, but by subtlety. The mammals had inherited the earth, and through them, the story was preparing for its next great act. The continents were nearly in their modern places. The climate, though still restless, was closer to what we know. The stage was set not just for survival, but for civilization. The next chapter of the tale would see fire tamed, tools shaped, and stories spoken by the flickering light of the hearth. For now, picture the mammals of ancient ages, great herds crossing windswept plains, bats swirling in twilight, whales diving into blue depths, primates leaping through green canopies. The giants were gone, but life had not diminished. It had only changed its shape, and in that change, found the resilience that carries us still. From the quiet branches of tropical forests, primates had watched the world with curious eyes for millions of years. They lived in groups, grooming, climbing, and foraging, their hands skilled at grasping, their eyes trained on depth and detail. Among them, in Africa, a lineage of apes began to change. They left the trees more often, venturing onto the ground. Their posture grew straighter, their strides longer. Slowly, step by step, they learned to walk upright. These early ancestors, Australopithecines, stood only chest high, with small brains but clever hands. They chipped simple tools from stone, sharp flakes to cut meat, rough edges to crack bone. Their lives were hard, but their adaptability was unmatched. They could eat roots, fruit, insects, and scavenged flesh. They carried their young, sheltered together, and survived where others failed. Upright, they could see over tall grasses, spot predators, and travel long distances across the savanna. Over time, their descendants grew taller, stronger, and sharper of mind. Homo habilis, the handyman, left behind tools more refined, stones shaped deliberately into cutting edges. Then came Homo erectus, standing tall, ranging far. They were the first to master fire, flames that brought warmth, light, and protection. Fire softened food, stretched the day beyond sunset, and drew groups together into circles of flickering glow. Around campfires, bonds grew deeper, stories began to form, and culture found its first spark. Homo erectus was also the first great traveler. For nearly 2 million years, they spread out of Africa, across Asia and Europe. Their footprints mark riverbanks in Georgia, caves in China, plains in Indonesia. They adapted to heat, to cold, to endless variation. They learned to hunt in groups, to share tasks, to endure long journeys. In them, we see the first true echoes of ourselves: persistence, cooperation, and imagination. The climate of Earth tested them constantly. Ice ages came and went, glaciers advancing, forests retreating, deserts spreading. Yet our ancestors did not vanish. They followed herds, learned new plants, explored new lands. They were not the strongest of animals, nor the fastest, nor the fiercest, but they were among the most resourceful. A sharp stone, a wooden spear, a circle of fire. These simple tools tipped the balance of survival. As time passed, the human family grew more diverse. In Europe and Western Asia lived the Neanderthals, stocky and strong, skilled hunters who endured bitter winters. In Asia, Denisovans thrived, known to us now only through fragments of bone and the traces they left in our DNA. In Africa, other groups persisted, experimenting with tools, ornaments, pigments. Humanity was not one path, but many, braided together, mixing and merging as they met. And then, about 300,000 years ago, our own species appeared, Homo sapiens. With lighter builds and larger brains, they carried something intangible yet decisive, a gift for abstract thought, for language, for imagination. They painted with ochre, carved beads from bone, etched symbols on stone. They buried their dead with care. They looked at the stars and wondered. In them, memory deepened and hope expanded. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors were still wanderers. They lived in bands of hunters and gatherers, moving with the seasons, following game and harvests. They painted on cave walls, bison, horses, handprints pressed like signatures across time. They sang, danced, and told stories beneath the moon. Through stories, they carried knowledge of where to find water, when to plant seeds, how to honor spirits, how to endure. The Great Migration began. Small groups of Homo sapiens left Africa, crossing into the Middle East, then radiating outward into every corner of the earth. Some reached Europe and lived beside the Neanderthals. Others followed coasts into Asia, walked across land bridges into Australia, and much later, into the Americas. In the span of a few tens of thousands of years, humans had circled the planet. They learned to survive in tundra, desert, forest, and island. Everywhere they went, they carried fire, tools, and language. With those three powers, they reshaped the world. Fire opened the forest and protected the hearth. Tools sharpened their reach, turning stone into blade, wood into spear, bone into needle. And language allowed memory to leap across generations, linking the wisdom of the old to the curiosity of the young. By the end of the Ice Age, humanity was no longer just a survivor. We were innovators. We wove clothing from hides and plant fibers, built shelters of bone and wood, carved boats to cross rivers and seas. We tamed dogs from wolves, forging the first alliance between species. We learned to track stars for navigation, to listen to the seasons for planting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, we turned from wanderers to settlers. This was the dawn of humanity. The Earth, once ruled by reptiles and later by great mammals, now carried beings who dreamed, who remembered, who planned beyond tomorrow. They were still fragile, still vulnerable to drought, to predators, to famine. But within their hands lay the power to shape stone, to kindle fire, to imagine futures. From here, the story will quicken. Villages will rise. Seeds will be sown. Cities will grow beside rivers. Civilizations will emerge, weaving myth and science, war and beauty into the fabric of time. But for now, pause at this threshold, with early humans gathered by firelight, shadows dancing on cave walls, voices carrying through the dark. The dawn has broken. The world has a new storyteller, and its name is humanity. When the last ice age ended, the earth grew warmer. Glaciers retreated, seas rose, and green lands spread across the continents. Humanity, once only hunter and wanderer, began to notice the rhythm of plants and the return of animals. We learned to scatter seeds, to water them, to wait for harvest. Slowly, the first farms appeared. With farming came permanence, and with permanence came the dawn of civilization. It was by rivers that the earliest great societies took shape. In the valleys of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates, people built the world's first cities. They raised walls of mud brick, laid out streets, and dug canals to channel water to their crops. In Sumer, they invented writing, cuneiform pressed into clay, to count harvests and record stories. They built ziggurats, temples rising like mountains toward the heavens. Kings ruled, laws were carved into stone, and myths of gods and heroes filled the night with meaning. To the west, along the Nile, another civilization blossomed. Egypt rose from the gift of the river, its yearly floods laying down fertile soil along narrow banks. Here, pharaohs claimed divine authority, and monuments of staggering size were built in their honor. Pyramids rose from desert plains, pointing to the sky, their stones aligned with the stars. Priests studied the heavens, measured time, and developed calendars. In hieroglyphs, they wrote prayers and records, filling tombs with words meant to last for eternity. Along the riverbanks, farmers planted wheat and barley, feeding a people who believed life itself was part of an endless cycle of death and rebirth, echoing the Nile's flood. Farther east, in the valleys of the Indus, another civilization thrived. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro grew with carefully planned streets, wells, and drainage systems. Their houses were built with uniform bricks, Their trade stretched across wide lands. Though their script remains undeciphered, their order and sophistication still astonish us. In their marketplaces, beads and pottery were exchanged, and in their homes, water flowed through channels, comforts far ahead of their age. In China, along the Yellow River, villages grew into kingdoms. Dynasties formed, weaving power with the mandate of heaven. Bronze was cast into weapons and ritual vessels. Silk was spun, lacquered wood carved, and great walls began to rise. Philosophers would later walk these lands, Confucius, Laozi, laying the foundations of thought that still guide millions today. But even in these earliest days, the Chinese people understood themselves as part of a grand cosmic order, the harmony of heaven, earth, and humanity bound together. Civilization brought more than monuments and inventions. It brought the weaving of human lives into something larger than any one family or tribe. Surplus food allowed specialization. Some farmed, others built, others fought, others prayed. Hierarchies formed, wealth and power accumulated. War was waged, but so too were trade and diplomacy. Ideas traveled along with goods. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, religion, all carried by caravans and ships, spreading seeds of culture from one valley to another. These early civilizations were fragile, dependent on weather, river floods, and the balance of nature. A drought could topple a kingdom. A shift in rivers could scatter a people. Yet their achievements endured. The wheel, the plow, irrigation, all were born in these ancient lands. Their myths still echo. Gilgamesh seeking immortality in Mesopotamia, Osiris reigning in the afterlife of Egypt, gods dancing in the Indus, dragons guarding rivers in China. For the first time in history, humanity was not only surviving, we were building legacies meant to last beyond a single lifetime. We measured time in calendars, preserved stories and symbols, raised monuments that still stand thousands of years later. If you walk among the ruins today, you can still feel their presence. In Mesopotamia, broken clay tablets whisper of long-forgotten kings. Along the Nile, colossal statues gaze serenely across the desert, their faces worn but unyielding. In the Indus, streets lie silent, yet their straight lines reveal the order of their builders. And in China's ancient valleys, fragments of bronze and jade tell of rituals performed under the gaze of ancestors. This was humanity's first great flowering. From scattered bands, we had become nations. From fires in caves, we had built cities with temples and palaces. From memory carried only in stories, we had invented writing to outlast death itself. The rivers gave us life, and in return, we gave the world civilization. From here, the story would grow larger. Empires would rise and fall, ideas would clash and mingle, and humanity would stretch its ambition across continents. But it was here, in these valleys of water and stone, that the pattern began. Order, belief, knowledge, and the dream of eternity. Civilization did not remain in river valleys alone. As centuries passed, kingdoms grew into empires, and ideas spread wider than ever before. Humanity stepped onto a broader stage, where armies marched, philosophers debated, and stories of gods and heroes traveled from one land to another. It was the age of empires, and of knowledge that would echo through time. In the eastern Mediterranean, on rocky shores and scattered islands, the Greeks built city-states. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, each a world unto itself, proud and fiercely independent. In Athens, democracy took root. the idea that citizens might debate and decide their own fate. Philosophers wandered its streets, Socrates questioning assumptions, Plato imagining ideal forms, Aristotle cataloging the natural world. On stone stages, dramas unfolded, telling stories of hubris and fate, of gods who walked among mortals. The Greeks studied the stars, mapped geometry, and sought to understand not only how the world works, but why. To the west, Rome rose from a cluster of villages by the Tiber into the greatest empire the ancient world had known. Its legions marched across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Roads spread like veins, carrying goods, soldiers, and ideas. Aqueducts brought water, arches and domes transformed architecture, law and governance created order across distant provinces. Rome was brutal at times, yet also astonishingly practical. It absorbed gods and cultures, weaving them into a vast tapestry. In its forums, orators spoke of justice, duty, and honor. And though Rome itself would fall, its language, its roads, and its laws would echo in civilizations yet unborn. Farther east, in India, civilizations flourished along the Ganges and beyond. Philosophers composed the Upanishads, probing the nature of reality and the self. The great epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, wove tales of war, duty, love, and destiny, carrying spiritual truths within story. The teachings of the Buddha spread across the land, offering a path of compassion, mindfulness, and liberation from suffering. Indian mathematicians conceived of zero and infinity, numbers that would reshape human thought. Their ideas traveled, crossing deserts and seas, to influence scholars far from their homeland. In China, dynasties rose and fell, each leaving its mark. The Han expanded trade along the Silk Road, carrying silk, paper, and porcelain to distant lands. Confucian teachings shaped government and family life, while Taoist sages spoke of harmony with nature and legalists of order through law. Paper, invented here, would one day carry knowledge across continents. Seismographs measured the tremors of the earth, compasses guided travelers, and scholars mapped the heavens with careful eyes. When the Western Roman Empire fell, many thought knowledge might fade with it. Yet in the Middle East, a new light burned bright. The Islamic Golden Age, centered in cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba, became a beacon of learning. Scholars translated Greek and Roman texts into Arabic, preserving and expanding them. They invented algebra, advanced medicine, charted the stars, and described optics. Libraries overflowed with manuscripts, and observatories reached for the heavens. Physicians like Avicenna wrote encyclopedias of healing, while philosophers like Averroes debated reason and faith. Their works, carried back into Europe centuries later, would help ignite the Renaissance. Knowledge flowed along trade routes as surely as spices and silk. Caravans crossed deserts, ships sailed seas, pilgrims journeyed to holy sites. Along the way, they shared more than goods. They exchanged ideas. Mathematics from India met astronomy from Mesopotamia. Philosophy from Greece mingled with theology in Baghdad. Tales and fables crossed borders, reshaped and retold, until they became part of many traditions. Humanity's wisdom was no longer bound to one people, but was becoming a shared inheritance. Yet empire was never only about knowledge. It was also about power, ambition, and conflict. Athens and Sparta fought for dominance. Rome crushed Carthage. Dynasties rose in China only to fall to rebellion. Empires promised order, but they demanded obedience. They built monuments to their glory, but also left ruins as warnings. Still, In their rise and fall, they carried humanity forward, expanding our sense of the world, connecting distant lands, forcing us to grapple with questions of justice, identity, and meaning. This age of empires was not the end, but a bridge. The wisdom of Greece, Rome, India, China, and the Islamic world would be passed on, preserved in manuscripts, inscribed in stone, whispered in stories. From them, the world inherited philosophy, mathematics, law, medicine, and the dream of understanding the universe itself. If you close your eyes, you can imagine it. The marble columns of Athens in the sun, the roar of a Roman forum, the chants of monks in Indian forests, the glow of lamps in a Baghdad library. All of it, different, distant, yet connected. Threads of knowledge weaving across the earth, forming the fabric of our shared past. The story would soon shift again. New kingdoms would rise in Europe, castles and cathedrals lifting toward the sky. Pilgrims and crusaders would walk long roads, merchants would sail new seas, and artists would begin to paint with light itself. But none of that would have been possible without this age, when humanity first dreamed beyond survival, beyond borders, and into the realm of ideas. The fall of Rome left Europe fragmented, its great roads crumbling, its cities diminished. Yet life continued, reshaped into smaller patterns, villages, castles, monasteries. This age we call the Middle Ages was not only darkness, as it is sometimes remembered, but also an age of endurance and quiet growth. It was a time when faith and tradition bound people together, when kingdoms rose on the strength of knights and kings, and when ideas, though hidden, were never truly lost. Across Europe, castles crowned hills, stone walls guarding against raids and wars. Fields stretched around them, worked by peasants who lived by the rhythm of the seasons, plowing in spring, harvesting in autumn, enduring the long chill of winter. The village church was the center of life, its bells marking hours, its stories of heaven and salvation giving meaning to hardship. Monasteries preserved ancient texts, copying by candlelight the works of Greek philosophers, Roman poets, and early Christian theologians. Without their patience, much of humanity's knowledge might have vanished. The Middle Ages were also an age of movement. Pilgrims walked to shrines, seeking blessings or forgiveness. Traders carried spices, cloth, and ideas along routes that connected Europe to the Middle East and Asia. Crusaders marched to the Holy Land, their journeys marked by faith and conflict. Along these paths, cultures met, clashed, and exchanged. From the Islamic world, Europe learned again of Aristotle, of medicine, of mathematics, knowledge that had been preserved and enriched while the West faltered. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, civilizations thrived. In China, the Tang and Song dynasties saw golden ages of art, poetry, and invention. Gunpowder, the compass, and printing transformed possibilities. In the Americas, the Maya built cities of stone, charted the heavens, and carved calendars of astonishing accuracy. Later, the Aztec and Inca would rise, creating vast empires with their own gods, temples, and roads. In Africa, kingdoms like Mali grew rich from trade, their cities alive with scholars, their rulers commanding caravans of gold and salt. The world was never still. It was diverse, dynamic, and vast. By the late Middle Ages, Europe began to stir with new energy. Universities formed, where students debated theology, law, and the natural world. Cathedrals rose higher and higher, their stained glass windows glowing like jewels, their spires reaching toward heaven. Gothic architecture was not only stone, it was aspiration made visible. Music filled cloisters, poetry bloomed, and stories like Dante's Divine Comedy guided souls through visions of hell, purgatory, and paradise. Then came the plague. In the 14th century, the Black Death swept across continents, carried by fleas and ships, devastating entire towns. Millions perished, yet even in this tragedy, transformation followed. Labor grew more valuable, traditions shifted, and new ways of thinking emerged. The old order cracked, making space for the birth of something new. That birth was the Renaissance, literally a rebirth. It began in Italy, in the cities of Florence, Venice, and Rome, where trade and wealth fueled patronage of art and learning. Scholars rediscovered classical texts. Artists studied anatomy and perspective. Architects revived the domes and columns of Greece and Rome. The canvas blossomed with color. Leonardo da Vinci painted faces alive with mystery. Michelangelo carved marble into living forms. Raphael filled chapels with harmony and light. But the Renaissance was not only art. It was curiosity turned outward to every subject. Astronomy challenged old views. Copernicus and Galileo looked to the heavens and dared to suggest that Earth was not the center of the universe. Printing presses spread books across Europe, multiplying knowledge faster than ever before. Science began to separate from myth, though still walking beside faith. Commerce expanded, banks and merchants built networks, and the idea of exploration stirred in the hearts of sailors. The Renaissance was a bridge between worlds. On one side lay the medieval age of knights, castles, and faith-bound tradition. On the other lay the modern age of discovery, science, and nation-states. It was a time when Europe awoke from centuries of slumber and reached again for the stars of knowledge. And yet, this rebirth did not erase the past. It built upon it, using the wisdom of monasteries, the scholarship of the Islamic Golden Age, and the enduring memory of Rome and Greece. Close your eyes, and you can almost hear it. The echo of church bells over stone villages, the chants of monks in dim cloisters, the thunder of hooves as knights rode under banners, the soft scratch of quills copying ancient texts. Then the sound shifts, the ringing of hammers shaping bronze statues, the turning of gears in printing presses, the voices of painters and scientists questioning old truths. It was the sound of an age changing. The Middle Ages had endured, preserving humanity's light through long winters of history. The Renaissance had rekindled it, fanning sparks into flames of art, science, and ambition. Soon, those flames would spread even further. Ships would sail west across unknown seas, kingdoms would expand across oceans, and the world itself would seem to grow larger than anyone had imagined. But for now, picture a painter at his canvas, a scholar bent over a manuscript, a mason carving stone high on a cathedral tower. This was an age of patience, of faith, and of rebirth, a chapter of humanity preparing for the discoveries to come. The Renaissance opened the door, and humanity stepped forward into a new age. The world was no longer bounded by familiar coasts. Curiosity and ambition pushed ships across oceans, connecting lands that had long developed apart. The 15th and 16th centuries became an age of exploration. Columbus sailed west and found the Americas. Vasco da Gama rounded Africa to reach India. Magellan's fleet circled the globe, proving the world vast, continuous, and round. These journeys were perilous, but they forever changed humanity's view of itself. Trade expanded with this global reach. Spices, silver, sugar, and silk crossed oceans. New crops, potatoes, maize, tomatoes, tobacco, reshaped diets and economies. But the age of exploration also carried shadows. Conquest, colonization, slavery, and the destruction of native peoples and cultures. The world grew richer in connections, yet harsher in conflict. The threads of globalization, bright and dark, were being woven. At the same time, minds burned with new questions. Galileo raised his telescope and saw moons circling Jupiter, challenging old belief. Kepler charted orbits in ellipses. Newton described gravity itself as the force binding heaven and earth. Knowledge was no longer only inherited. It was tested, measured, and proven. The scientific revolution gave humanity new eyes, new instruments, and new confidence in reason. With knowledge came power. The Enlightenment followed, a time when philosophers argued for liberty, equality, and the rights of man. Thinkers like Locke, Rousseau, and Voltaire challenged monarchs and traditions. Coffee houses became centers of debate. Pamphlets carried ideas like sparks across societies. Old hierarchies trembled as people asked whether rulers were truly divine, or whether authority belonged instead to the people. From these debates, revolutions erupted. In America, colonists declared independence from Britain, crafting a new nation on ideals of democracy and freedom. In France, citizens stormed the Bastille, toppling monarchy and proclaiming liberty, equality, fraternity. Across Europe and beyond, voices rose demanding representation, rights, and reform. Not all revolutions succeeded, and many were followed by turmoil, yet the old order was breaking, replaced by the idea that change itself was possible. Meanwhile, another revolution transformed daily life even more profoundly. In the late 18th century, the Industrial Revolution began. Steam engines powered factories. Spinning wheels wove cloth faster than ever before. Coal and iron fed machines that built railways, bridges, and ships. Cities swelled as people left farms to work in factories. Smoke rose from chimneys. Trains thundered across landscapes, and production multiplied. Humanity had harnessed fire once long ago. Now we had harnessed machines. Industry brought wealth, invention, and speed, but it also brought crowded cities, long hours, and harsh conditions. Children worked in mines, rivers ran black with soot, skies darkened with smoke. Inequality widened between nations that industrialized and those that did not. The machine was a marvel, but it was also a challenge, forcing humanity to rethink fairness, labor, and the relationship between progress and justice. Yet the pace of discovery only quickened. Vaccines fought disease, chemistry unveiled new elements, electricity lit streets and homes. Telegraph wires carried messages faster than horse or ship. Later, phones and radios carried voices across continents. Darwin proposed evolution by natural selection, linking all of life in one great tree. Pasteur revealed microbes, invisible yet powerful, changing medicine forever. The 19th century became an age of constant invention, a whirlwind of new possibilities. Nations, too, grew restless. Empires expanded across Africa and Asia, carving maps with rulers and treaties, exploiting lands and peoples in the name of progress and power. Nationalism stirred revolutions and wars. The modern world was being born in steel and steam, in ideas and ambition, in dreams and conflict. Still, within the noise of change, one truth endured. Humanity had entered a new chapter. We were no longer bound by the limits of muscle or wind. With machines, science, and ideas, we reshaped our environment on a scale once reserved for gods. The old world of kings and empires, of isolated valleys and slow journeys, was ending. The new world of industry, discovery, and revolution was rising, carrying humanity into an age unlike any before it. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of this era, the whistle of a train steaming across countryside, the chatter of revolution in a crowded square, the clatter of printing presses spreading ideas, the hum of machines spinning cloth, the sparks of invention in quiet workshops. It was an age of wonder and of upheaval, when humanity's power grew faster than its wisdom, and the question of how to use that power became our greatest challenge. The story was not finished. Ahead lay wars of unprecedented scale, technologies that would change the planet itself, and dreams of flight and space. But here, in the modern age of revolutions and industry, humanity truly stepped onto the stage of history as a global force. No longer scattered peoples, but a single restless species shaping the destiny of Earth. The 20th century dawned with promise and unease. Trains crisscrossed continents, telegraphs tied nations together, and factories thundered with industry. The Wright brothers lifted their fragile plane into the air, proving humans could fly. Einstein rewrote our understanding of space and time. Inventions multiplied: cars, radios, moving pictures, making the world seem faster, smaller, more connected. Yet beneath this progress lay tension, and soon the century would be scarred by conflict, unlike any before. In 1914, the First World War erupted. Trenches cut across Europe, filled with mud, fear, and endless struggle. Millions perished in a storm of shells and gas, while old empires crumbled under the weight of mechanized war. The war to end all wars left scars on every nation, yet peace was fragile. Just 2 decades later, the world was engulfed again. The Second World War unleashed devastation on an unimaginable scale. Tanks roared across plains, bombers darkened skies, cities were reduced to rubble. The Holocaust revealed humanity's darkest cruelty, while battles stretched from the deserts of Africa to the islands of the Pacific. It ended in firestorms, and in 1945, with the detonation of atomic bombs, a new age began, an age where humanity had gained the power to destroy itself in an instant. And yet, even in the shadow of war, humanity reached for the stars. Rockets that once carried weapons soon carried satellites, then people. In 1969, for the first time, humans walked upon the moon, leaving footprints in dust untouched for billions of years. The Earth was photographed from space, small, blue, fragile. For many, it was the first glimpse of our shared home as one. The decades that followed were marked by both division and progress. The Cold War split the world into rival blocs, shadowed by nuclear fear. But it also drove advances in science and technology. Space exploration, computers, medical breakthroughs. Civil rights movements rose, demanding equality and justice. Colonized nations declared independence, reshaping the political map. The world's people, long separated by oceans and empires, were becoming more connected, their struggles more shared. The end of the century brought new revolutions, not of steam or industry, but of information. Computers shrank from room-sized machines to devices on every desk, then to phones in every pocket. The internet linked voices across continents. Knowledge that once filled libraries could now be searched in seconds. Communication sped faster than thought, carrying not only wisdom, but also confusion, connection, and noise. Medicine advanced, extending lifespans. Airplanes shrank the globe, carrying travelers across oceans in hours. Satellites mapped every mountain and ocean floor. Humanity grew into a planetary species, bound together by trade, technology, and fragile ecosystems. Yet challenges multiplied. Climate change altered weather and seas. Pollution spread. Resources strained. Old conflicts flared in new forms. The gift of power was always twinned with responsibility, and the balance was never certain. Now, in the 21st century, we stand at another threshold. Artificial intelligence writes and speaks. Genetic engineering edits the code of life. Spacecraft probe Mars and beyond. Our tools are greater than ever, but so too are our questions. Will we use them to heal or to harm, to divide or to unite? The story of humanity has always been one of survival, adaptation, and imagination. That story is not finished. It is still being written by us. Close your eyes and picture the present not as an end, but as a moment in a long river of time. Behind us stretches the vast history of the cosmos. The Big Bang, the birth of stars, the rise of Earth, the long patience of evolution, the reign of dinosaurs, the dawn of humans, the growth of civilizations. Ahead lies a horizon still hidden, where our choices will shape what kind of world will follow. Perhaps future generations will settle other planets, carrying the memory of Earth with them. Perhaps they will discover energy drawn from the stars, or wisdom deep enough to balance power with peace. Perhaps they will look back, as we look back now, and see our age as the turning point where humanity learned to see itself as one. The history of the world is vast, but it is also intimate. The atoms forged in stars burn now in your blood. The struggles of ancient people echo in your language, your laws, your art. The dreams of countless generations rest in your hands. From the silence before time, to the first spark of the Big Bang, to the hum of modern cities and the glow of screens, the story continues. You are part of this great tale, born of stars, shaped by Earth, carrying forward the story of life. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, as it has for billions of years, and the next chapter will begin.